I don't know if you've seen this, but in some churches, if a visitor comes for the first time, the priest or pastor might ask them to stand up and introduce themselves, say where they're from, and that can be pretty nerve-wracking for some visitors to get that much attention. Now, one of my favorite stories in Acts, and by one of my favorites I mean top 20, I have a lot of favorite stories from Acts. Acts 13, which we'll be reading in the next week or two in our study of Acts at St. Mary's. In Acts 13, one Sabbath, Paul goes into a synagogue in Pisidian Antioch on kind of the start of his missionary journeys. He goes to the synagogue on the Sabbath, and they do the reading of the scripture and so on. So you think, well, at this point of the service, they're going to have maybe the sermon. That's what we're used to. But the rulers of the synagogue asked Paul, hey, you're new here. Why don't you stand up and give us words of encouragement? Why don't you, in essence, give the sermon? So imagine that. You're a visitor for the first time in a church, and they don't just ask you to stand up and introduce yourself, but in fact to give the sermon. Now, that's a really tall order. I think we don't have to be prepared necessarily to give these long sermons that will become these big speeches in the book of Acts. But it is a good practice for us to get used to having some words of encouragement or something edifying to say to other people. Right now is the period of COVID-19, and that means a lot of isolation, shelter in place, which is really hard. But it's also the opportunity to start a lot of new things. And one of the new things I would like to try is a St. Mary's YouTube channel. It'll give each of us an opportunity to share words of encouragement with other people in a new way. I think it'll help develop new relationships and help bond our community, especially under the current circumstances where we'll be able to see one another face to face at a time where being physically face to face is so hard. I hope that there will be pieces on this YouTube channel that are devotional, including music, or maybe educational to tell us about some social justice issues. But in any case, a chance for us to develop our community in a new way, practice being producers of media and not just consumers, and exercising our ability to share words of encouragement with other people.